Cannabis Common Sense, the show that tells the truth about marijuana and the politics behind its prohibition.
Hello and welcome to another exciting edition of Cannabis Common Sense. We have a great show for you tonight. Once again, we have Patrick Atagi as our guest. He is the CEO, president, and founder of the National Industrial Hemp Council in Washington, D.C. He's been doing some amazing work. I met him in Bangkok last November, December for the Asia International Hemp Expo. We both were speakers there and on some panels, so we'll be talking later. We have a very short hemp news segment tonight, and as we always do, we will immediately bring on our infamous dancing cannabis lead.
I feel the force.
Okay, our hemp news segment starts. The use of medical cannabis products is associated with substantial long-term decreases in the daily use of prescription opioids among patients suffering from chronic pain, according to data published today in the Journal of the American Medical Association, or JAMA. As many of our long-term viewers know, we have a lot of stories on this subject, but the Journal of the American Medical Association is very influential. Researchers affiliated with the State University of New York at Albany and the New York State Department of Health assessed the impact of medical cannabis on opioid use patterns in a cohort of over 8,000 chronic pain patients receiving long-term opioid therapy. Subjects were studied for a period of 8 months. The investigators reported that the patient's daily morphine milligram intake diminished following cannabis therapy and that this decline grew more significantly over time. The authors concluded, quote, in this cohort, patient receiving long-term opioid therapy and receiving medical cannabis for a longer duration was associated with reductions in opioid dosages. These findings contribute to robust evidence for clinicians regarding the potential benefits of medical cannabis in reducing the opioid burden for patients receiving long-term opioid therapy and possibly reducing their risk of overdose, end quote. The findings are consistent with numerous other studies documenting that patients frequently use cannabis for pain mitigation and that many patients either reduce or eliminate their consumption of opioids and other medications following the initiation of cannabis therapy. The relationship between cannabis and opioid use is among the best documented aspects of marijuana policy. In short, the science demonstrates that marijuana is a relatively safe and effective pain reliever and that patients with legal access to it consistently reduce their use of prescription opioid medications. The data published earlier this month in the same Journal of the American Medical Association reported that nearly 1 in 3 patients with chronic pain use cannabis as an analgesic agent, and many of those who do substitute in place of opioids. In clinical trials, the co-administration of either smoked cannabis or oral cannabinoids has been documented to augment the pain-relieving effects of opioids. In one study, vaporized herbal cannabis was demonstrated to enhance the pain-relieving activity of morphine and oxycodone in chronic pain patients, therefore potentially allowing for opioid treatment at lower doses with fewer side effects. Another study reported similarly enhanced analgesic efficacy when low doses of oral THC were combined with hydromorphone, also known as Dilaudid. The authors reported these data are indicative of the possible opioid-sparing effects of cannabinoids. These synergistic effects have also been documented in settings where subjects were provided with only subtherapeutic doses of cannabis and opioids. The full text of this study, changes in prescribed opioid dosages among patients receiving medical cannabis for chronic pain, New York State 2017 through 2019, is available from the Journal of the American Medical Association. Our last story tonight, we'll talk about Oklahomans are going to decide on March 7th whether to approve a citizens-initiated measure, State Question 820, legalizing the adult use of marijuana market. State Question 820 permits adults to legally possess and home cultivate personal use quantities of cannabis while also establishing a licensed retail marketplace. Those with past marijuana convictions or those who are currently incarcerated for certain cannabis-related crimes would be able to petition the courts for either record expungement or resentencing consideration. The advocates for State Question 820 in July of 2022 turned in nearly twice the total signatures necessary to qualify for the ballot in November 2022. However, the Oklahoma Secretary of State's office took an excessive amount of time to ultimately verify the proponent signatures. Opponents of the measure then filed a series of questionable legal challenges litigating various facets of the campaign, including challenges to the initiative's summary language. Although Oklahoma's justices ultimately dismissed those challenges, they did so after time had elapsed for state officials to include State Question 820 on the November 2022 printed ballot. Last October, Republican Governor Kevin Stitt issued an executive proclamation calling for a special election to be held on Tuesday, March 7, 2023. State Question 820 will be the only item on the ballot. According to a just published economic analysis, excise taxes from retail cannabis sales could yield $434 million in new taxes to Oklahoma's budget over the next 4 years. Oklahomans previously voted in a special election in 2018 to legalize the cultivation and dispensing of marijuana for medical purposes. Oklahomans who are not yet registered to vote have until Friday, February 10th to do so. Residents can check their voters' registration status or register to vote online at the Oklahoma State Election Board's OK Voter portal. The deadline for voters to request an absentee ballot is Monday, February 20th. Early voting begins Thursday, March 2nd. Polling locations are available again at OK Voter portal. Learn more about the campaign or volunteer at Yes on 820 campaign. That is the end of our Hemp News segment tonight. Now we go to our interview with Patrick Atagi. But first, I just want to remind our viewers, if you are a loved one, are looking for a doctor who can help you obtain a medical marijuana recommendation, either because you live in a state where it's just become legal or you don't want to see your marijuana use included in your other medical records, you can call us. We have doctor referrals all over the United States. Call us at 503-235-4606. Again, that's 503-235-4606. Now we go to our interview with Patrick Atagi, the Executive Director and President of the National Industrial Hemp Council. Stay tuned and help restore hemp. Good night. I would like to welcome Patrick Atagi to the show. Patrick is the CEO and President of the National Industrial Hemp Council and is promoting industrial hemp. We just met in Bangkok, Thailand for the Asia International Hemp Expo and found out he's from Oregon too. So welcome to our show, Patrick.
Well, thank you very much. Glad to be here. And it's kind of funny you say Oregon. As we talked before, I used to work for United States Senator Marco Hatfield, who was then chairman of the Appropriations Committee at the Senate.
And federal courthouse is named for
Federal
him.
courthouse, and I actually helped name the federal courthouse. I did the research for that back in 94, 93 for that. That was one of my assignments when I was a legislative assistant. But the funny thing is that I'm from Eastern Oregon, as you know, is very different than Portland. So right, senators like Clackawutta, Tualawutta, I didn't really know the names because I was from the Eastern Oregon. But we all come together under hemp, so that's the good news.
Now, folks in Eastern Oregon are voting. Some of them are voting to join Idaho, saying that their culture is divergent enough from the Willamette Valley culture, I guess, or the I-5 corridor at least.
It's different. In the New York Times, they had a photo that actually is Adrian, Oregon, and I actually have a photo reproduced with me in front of the sign in Adrian, which is only about 3 miles from our farm, if that. It's just up the road. So I thought that was pretty funny to see a town of about 85 people in the New York Times.
So is that over near Baker City or where is that?
Now I'm not gonna call you Paul on that. It's Baker. There's no Baker. I'm showing my age.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a little bit further than Baker City. It's probably about another hour and a half. We're right on the Snake River, bordering Idaho. Literally, you can't go any farther. Our farm abuts right up to the Snake River.
Oh, okay. So you're almost in Idaho then.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
Still farm there?
Nope. It's all it's rental ground. So no, we don't farm anymore.
I see. Well, that's interesting. So how did you end up working for Senator Mark Hatfield? I don't think I mentioned to you that I was an aide to Governor Kate Brown.
Yeah, you mentioned that while we were in Thailand.
For a few months, though. Yeah. I didn't work in the capacity you did. You worked in the D.C. office?
I did. I was in the 7-Eleven Hart building. I was actually a little trivia for you. I was the last person out of his office in Washington, D.C. When he retired, Steve Nelson, then chief of staff, walked out the door. I walked behind him, and I still have his sign because I pulled out 7-Eleven Heart, Senator Marco Hatfield, and I still have it. So, yeah, I worked for him until he retired.
I moved to Oregon in '84. I think he was already there when I moved to Oregon.
Yeah.
But is it Ron Wyden who took his seat and once he retired? Or
I believe so. I'm trying to remember how that went, but I think it was Merkley who took his.
Berkeley? Okay.
But I'm not quite sure about that, so I'm going to get called on that. Somebody's going to call up and chastise me for not knowing that. But Ron Wyden is most likely because of the age.
Yeah. So how is it that you came from working as an aide in DC to working with the National Industrial Hemp Council?
Well, I think the better question is, how did I end up in Washington, D.C. working for Senator Marco Hatfield?
Let's start there.
Yeah, because I actually went from the farm. I went to school at the University of Notre Dame in Indiana. And then I actually went to the Peace Corps after that, and I was an agroforestry volunteer.
Where?
In the Central African Republic, the Republic Centrafricaine, French-speaking country next to Cameroon, and then near what is now the Democratic Republic of Congo. But as you know, it was Zaire at the time.
Oh, yeah.
So I spent 2.5 years there being an agroforestry volunteer. And then that's where I met my then girlfriend, now wife of almost 30 years, and followed her out to Washington, D.C., and ended up working for Senator Hatfield.
It was love that led you, not the political drama so much.
No, not so much. I mean, I was obviously, involved in politics in school. I had, my undergraduate degrees in public administration and psychology. So, an interest.
Out of Notre Dame.
Yeah. So,
psychology, and it's kind of a dual degree.
Yeah, it was a dual degree. It's really, more specifically, it's a arts and letters policy associate degree. I was doing actually research at Stanford and decided that really wasn't the way I wanted to go. So picked up the output degree, to shore up the psychology. But, I'll tell you what, I use my psychology degree in my sociology classes almost every day. I think it's very important. And now, seeing now my daughter's at the University of Chicago, one of the best business schools in the country. And what they have there is behavioral management, right? Behavioral finance, where it's, back in the day, people kind of looked at psychology a little funny, but now it's really mainstream and very important. But I think in general, it's really helpful. But yeah, so long answer to your short question, that's, how I came here. And, my sister, she's a reconstructive plastic surgeon in Denver, and she's planned her whole life, and things just kind of fit together. And it's kind of like with the hemp. You asked me, how did I end up in hemp? Everything's coming together. Running an association, having been in associations for over 20 years. Having training in the management, finance, membership. Through the association of Society of.
What associations were you working in previously, if I may ask?
Yeah, so I worked for a very large association, one of the largest in Washington, D.C., the American Chemistry Council. I was in the chlorine division representing Dow, DuPont, PPG, Oxy, et cetera. Then mainly agriculture prior to that, the United Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Association, which became United Fresh, which became the International Fresh Foods. Going back to my farm background, we raised onions, potatoes, sweet corn, sugar beets back in the day. We had the sugar factory in Nessa, Oregon, and now there's one, and the other one in Nampa, Idaho. So Follow Association, my first job after Mark Hatfield was working for the U.S. Apple Association, the kind you eat, not the Apple computer. People always thought, wow, you work for Apple. I'm like, right. Okay. I am working for Apple. Yeah, that's cool. I'm working for, so the Washington Apple Commission in Washington State. That's why I was wondering about, your background a little bit. So, definitely agriculture background.
Yeah, I went to Evergreen State College in Portland State.
Yeah, nice.
And Tufts University in China. So it's a little, mine was more independent, you might say. I was looking to import hemp when I went to school in China.
Very cool. Yeah, very, very interesting. And to see where we are today, that's just fantastic. Would you ever imagine that, Paul?
Well, it's a little different than I imagined. Yeah, we imagined it.
Right.
We didn't
know the reality of it,
Right. Right.
and of course, we're still in an early implementation phase, really, of what hemp is capable of here in the United States. And so, I was hoping we would spark something bigger, and we definitely have. There's no doubt about it.
Oh,
And
absolutely.
around the world, thank goodness. But it preceded us by millennia in
Yes.
terms of its
Right.
association with our culture. I touch on its association with Japanese culture,
Yeah.
and it's still used in the coronation of the
Yep.
emperor
Yep.
in the rite ceremony there. So there's one farmer who I got to meet at the first
Yeah.
hemp industrial environmental forum
Yeah.
in Kyoto back in 2016.
Right. But he
Yeah,
farms up in Hokkaido, right? Doesn't he farm up north?
yeah,
Yeah.
farms in Hokkaido, exactly.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. I was able
uh,
to meet the emperor when I worked for the senator. One of the perks of working for the chair of the appropriations committee. So I have a picture, sitting behind him and his wife at the Kennedy Center. So
that would have been Hirohito, right? The one that had been there since the 20s or 30s, at least.
no, his son. It was after that.
Oh,
Yeah.
wasn't Hirohito? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
I think it was Akita, or
Yeah.
I don't know exactly. Started with an A, I think. But anyway,
But worlds converge, right? And with the FDA announcement, last week, um, it's all coming together in just this very small span. And you asked about my background, DuPont, one of my clients. So you go back to the 40s, was it polyester? What was the push? You and I think you might have heard it in Thailand while we were there. I think we talked about it, or maybe you heard about it, but that was news to me. Was some of the Thai were saying, how strict Thailand is on drugs. I mean, they were executing
yeah,
people for
they
trafficking,
were.
right? It's
They-
just crazy.
Now that marijuana is kind of legalized, it's
Yeah.
different.
And remember, and I don't know whether you talked with folks, but this has been a learning experience for me, as we'll dive into a little bit later. They said, well, that was a Western idea. The whole making marijuana illegal, as you
Oh, yeah,
said, it's
it
millennia they
definitely
were using it, right?
it was required. It was
Yeah, right.
spearheaded by Harry Anslinger under Eisenhower, really,
Yep. There
in
you
terms
go.
of international effort. And then Kennedy axed him, and that's another story. I was in Dallas that day Kennedy was
Oh,
assassinated, but
really?
I was only 2 years
Wow.
old.
Wow.
Yeah, but
Where were you,
anyway,
right? One of those where were you days, right?
right. I still remember, but it's not the perspective. I had the perspective of a 3-year-old.
Uh,
So,
yeah.
but I definitely have some memories revolving around that.
Wow.
But anyway,
Yeah.
uh, so you were working for these other associations. How did you come to work for the National Industrial Hemp Council?
Well, it's just kind of a confluence of so many factors. I used to work for USDA, worked for Secretary Johans and Secretary Banneman. Yeah, as you know, Secretary Banneman came from the California Department of Agriculture. Again, that background in agriculture, specialty crops. So we have our farm out in Eastern Oregon. It's about 100. My dad was getting older. We sold all the personal land, and there was a little bit of corporate land still left. So we're trying to figure out what to do. My two older sisters, my oldest sister is as I mentioned before, is a plastic reconstructive surgeon in Denver. So definitely not farming. My other sister runs a pastry shop out of Ashland, Oregon, and her husband was actually a classmate of my older sister. So definitely not. I'm in Washington D.C. There's a reason I'm not farming. That's a different personality. Um, and very, my daughter would be a good farmer. I'm not. She's very meticulous, very smart. I'm more 30,000 foot level, and kind of get things done. But long story short is that we were trying to figure out what to do with about 110 acres. So similar story to a lot of folks. Um, you know, $18,000 an acre, $2,000 input. In the night, when it was legalized. So we started looking into it, and then I started digging around, and heard stories. It's kind of interesting. I heard stories about cleavers in Central Oregon making a ton of money. And they actually used to live next door to us, which is another story. And they run onions and potatoes, and hemp is just one of their rotational crops, but we can get into that. But they made a lot. They invested it back into their farm and have a vertically integrated company. But
Thinking CBD,
what's that? Mm-hmm.
were they growing CBD, not fiber or grain?
No, do you know Jason and Alan Cleaver?
No, I don't.
They're in Hermiston. You need to see their facility. It's like about a $50 million facility.
Wow. Processing CBD hemp.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the doctors I work with say they think CBG is more widely effective. That it has the medicinal properties both of THC and CBD without the
Right.
associated high.
Yeah, or headaches and type of things that
Yeah.
come with it. That's a whole nother show. We can do a whole nother show.
Market for sure. The market for CBD is better.
Yeah. So to go back to your question, that's how we got started in it. You know, I was researching it, you know, talking to farmers in the area. You know, a lot of them were growing. Craig Frohr was growing, you know, and some others was looking into it. You know, then we thought, well, we'll start with 10 acres. And then my cousin was working for a CBD processor in Central Oregon. So we started talking, and it was like, this isn't growing wheat, right? You're just not spreading wheat and then furrowing it and watering it and just, you know, kind of letting it grow and walk, you know, doing that type of thing.
Or hops.
Yeah, we didn't do hops. There's a lot of hops being grown where I'm at, and we didn't grow hops. You know, so we were, you know, again, there's a new crop, you know, yeah, it was being grown illegally, you know, it's, you know, or
Not on scale.
you're right, not on scale. Well,
right.
Yeah, we'll leave that there and say, yeah.
Not many the illegal plots.
There's a number of illegal plots in Eastern Oregon.
Today, but less so then, because now they got them covered.
Yeah, absolutely. So, but anyway, so I started looking into it, and you know, you know, several folks who kept asking me questions, and so finally, like, I'm this is like an association. I'm answering your questions, and you know, why don't we get this thing started? And you know, again, have a very long background, a lot of connections in DC, nationally and internationally, and you know, this has legs, you know, and I had full support, you know, from my then girlfriend, now wife, you know, Tracy, very supportive of it. And that really says a lot, you know, because she's, you know, always the good spouse of, you know, keeping me in check of, you know, chasing windmills. And this has legs, right? So, you know, jumped into it and created this association and did it, you know, first as a chair of the board, and brought together folks from throughout my history, from Undersecretary Bill Hawks when I was a political at USDA, to career employees like Pat Shake, who was a deputy administrator at USDA Foreign Agricultural Service, Barry Carpenter, who was the director of the Agricultural Marketing Service, which now oversees hemp, you know, bringing those people, farmers, you know, into the fold. And so, you know, that's how it started. And we know DC, and that's how we've been, you know, successful in what we've been doing. We have over, you know, 1.1 million in grants alone, because we know how the process works. You know, and that.
When did you start the NIHC?
I'm sorry.
When did you start the NIHC?
So you're the March of 2019.
So are you the founder, or were there other founders involved at the time?
I was the founder of the organization because I was doing all the work in Oregon to start off with, and that worked out really well, right? We had, you know, there's Senator Merkley came to our inaugural meeting in Portland, you know, and spoke there. We had the FDA Associate Commissioner, you know, speak at our meeting the first time after their public hearing. And it was, you know, we'll get into it, but, you know, when we, you know, when I came to Portland, I'm like coming home, but it was always like, oh, here come the suit and ties, right? And not in a good way, in a disparaging way. But by the time we were done, it was like, oh, it's a suit and ties. If we're going to make this mainstream, which it is becoming, that you do need to know how the government works. You do need how to work with the government. You know, throwing rocks, you know, I was on the inside. It's not really fun having rocks thrown at you, right? So let's try to figure out how to work together. And that's really how it all started with, you know, Mr. Bill Hawks, Undersecretary Hawks. His saying is, working together works. And it does. Thailand was a fantastic example. We had Global Hemp Association. We had Chad with Victory Hemp. We had IND Hemp. We had U.S. Tobacco. And, it was a great example of, Mandy's connections and the MAP funding, the Market Access Program funding that NIHC obtained, to support that trip, to bring people there. We brought, 7 people there all together. Morris Beagle was there. It was great, and we worked together. And this is leading to things. This is leading to big things.
I introduced Morris to them, and Jason, but I didn't know you had such a big team there from your organization.
Yeah, no, it was great, and it just shows the parts and pieces. You come together, you work together, and that's what the industry's been saying. And I think Thailand really underscored. If we work together, we can really move the needle, and we did. I mean, we really moved the needle. Where we're looking at talking to.
Well, it's the most legal place in the world now, really.
Yeah,
it's
right.
Here in the United States, and with the government support, giving out 1 million marijuana plants to 1 million consumers.
Right.
That's pretty amazing.
It is, and it just goes to show you the opportunity, right? If you do it right.
Yeah.
And
well, once the royal family came on board, they have, a lot of sway there. They're much more involved in governing than most other royal families.
They do, and they're very well loved.
They're revered,
which makes a big
revered. They're definitely everyone looks up to them there.
And it shows you what can happen if you do it right. I mean, the more I walked around, the more I talked to people. I'm actually going to go back in about 2 weeks. I'll be there. Some of the connections that we made, foreign investors that want to invest in U.S. companies. I'm meeting with a couple of VC groups there. I've already connected some of our members, to them, and they're having discussions in the 8-figure range, to promote U.S. business in Thailand, because you have a restriction, but there's a lot of things that can be done. I know, a couple of universities are already there, some that are looking at going there, looking at companies who are already there, just quietly working, and the opportunity is just huge. So
it's amazing. The conference there was at the main center. I think we'll run a little video in here that they just revised here today, about 3.5 minutes about the Thai event.
Love it, absolutely.
This is a first-time event here, and it's in the main convention center for Thailand with hundreds of exhibitors. It's just very, very impressive.
This moment, this expo is a great event for launch the industry in Thailand. So we are very grateful for the country for this opportunity, and welcome to everybody.
Because Thailand is the hub in Asia today.
Get a bit of the atmosphere and see what's possibility for my business. I can to grow in the hemp business.
งานตัวนี้ครับก็มีเรื่องของเทคโนโลยีดีมากๆครับน่าสนใจครับ
Southeast Asia, Thailand's got the pole position to become the lead hemp producer.
Oh, I have to say it has been an amazing experience because we're looking at the size of the building, the size of the convention center where the event is taking place, and so many different businesses, so many different experts already invited from all over the world. So I'm just being grateful to be part of it.
Good impact to all the weed farmer, all the weed staller. Thank you very much for this good exhibition. We learned a lot.
Very, very happy to see how Thailand in this progress, I think, is world leading. So congratulations.
ได้เห็นแบบหลายๆมุมมองรู้สึกว่าการชงเนี่ยมี potential มากๆที่จะสามารถนำพาหลายๆ aspect ใน society ให้ไปไกลยิ่งกว่านี้ได้ค่ะ
Thailand is looking to become the hub of Asia, so very happy to be here. So many products and so many interests, not only in the trade show, but in the city, and very good trade show.
I feel Thailand has a position to not only become a hub for people to come here, but also for business to develop their products here.
The show was very, very professional. The group of people, of experts were from all around the world in a way, from all continents.
I enjoy very much to be here because I think the hemp can change the world and can save the world.
I believe that Thailand will be the innovation hub for Asia for all things hemp, which is one of the reasons why I relocated to Thailand. We have industry, we have government, we have climate, we have all of the ingredients required for Thailand to be the leader, not only for Southeast Asia, but for the entire world.
It's been so impressive to see such a great hemp export, where so many innovative hemp products were displayed. And moreover, we as International Hemp Environmental Forum are so grateful to be invited to be a part of such a great show. As the co-founder and the representative at this moment of International Hemp Environmental Forum, I wish Hemp in Thailand will lead the hemp industry of the world.
Yeah, but so you're going back.
Yeah.
And it's amazing. You're hooking up investors with current businesses. It sounds like some pretty sizable investments as well.
Yeah, some very sizable investments. So very excited about it. You know, we've had the MAP funding, the Market Access Program funding for 3 years. So the first year was building, was going to events. We hadn't because of COVID, been out. So we spent a lot of time, our board members, industry, interest companies, coming with us to vet these shows. Are they real or?
Yeah. Is this funding some of the federal funding you were talking about?
It is. Yeah, we get $215,000 to do that. We have to match it. So, we don't take any administrative fees or anything from that. We have to, it's a matching that we have to put in, my time, board members' time, members, company, their time, some travel we pay for on our own through the NIAC. Plug for membership. It's always, we can always use more members. And,
website again, hempindustrial.com.
NIACOA.com.
Oh, okay.
National Industrial Hemp Council of America. NIHCOA.com. National Industrial Hemp Council of America. And have some patience with us because we are revamping our website. There's a story behind that too. It's a very much putting our flag down because it's global. So you're marketing not just to the U.S. market but internationally. And so now we're moving into a more working horse, Red Wing Boots kind of a website where it's more clear on the mission. So we go back to the first part. So on the market access program, first year was going to the shows, making sure, are these legitimate, not legitimate, looking for the positive and what we can really move the needle in terms of U.S., helping U.S. companies export, either hemp or, product technology IP. And that's what Thailand really was, is, wow, what an opportunity for U.S. companies. So the
cannabis market's completely open there. I know that's outside the purview of the National Industrial Hemp Council, but they've completely legalized marijuana. There's stores all over the tourist areas, but there also seem to be targeted at tourists, I believe.
There is that, right? There's a part of that, the country, has that. Recreational, the Pattaya and Phuket and, the beaches and, the recreation. But there's also the hemp side of it, right? The protein in hemp there, if you look around, people are very health conscious. So, hemp is a natural fit. You have a lot of fish protein, there, but they're always looking for something, alternative.
It's a traditional crop there. It's,
right.
Necessarily prohibited it back in the 50s, but before that, it was integrated into the culture.
Oh, absolutely. Just what you said earlier, like millennia. Really, it's only been about, 40, well, more than that, 70 years now, but late 30s, early 40s, right?
Yeah.
So no, and so, you got a lot of people with a puzzled look on their face of, why is this illegal? Or even in India and other Southeast Asia countries. So I see the dominoes falling because also it's just the dollar investment. After COVID, I mean, it was really sparking the economy. And that's, if I take one step back, the first step on the MAP program was us looking around. The second part was looking for investment opportunities. And 3 is now putting it all together. And that's what we're doing. So that's part of the reason I'm going back to Thailand, is to have that investment, U.S. companies come into Thailand, and not just Asia, because Thailand is really setting the stage. I really think, personally, opinion, that you're going to see the dominoes start falling. Same in the U.S. I mean, what's the interest in the U.S.? Two things in Washington, D.C., dollars and votes, right? And so we have, $2 trillion in, aid money that went out, during COVID. We have to pay for all this somehow. And, cannabis is a way of doing it. And it's a very vast market. Back in 2019, we talked to the American Beverage Association, for example, and their parent companies, I won't use their names because we know who they are, and they're being quiet about it. But they've researched this. When I go to these conferences, I always hear, don't they know? Doesn't XYZ know? Don't these companies know? And they do. They've done the research, and they know, as smart as the people are in our industry, these companies, billion-dollar companies, have teams of people to do the research for them, and they know what it is. I talked with the head of global government affairs for Nestle, worked with her, and at Molly Phillips Fogarty at U.S. Department of Agriculture, and she's like, "Yeah, we know, we've done the investigation." This was in 2019, and they'd already done it prior to that, and they're saying, "No, we may get into it, we may not, but legally, it's a risk." And so we're watching and waiting, and they're not in a hurry. They're billion-dollar companies. It's just like the farmers, who have it as a rotational crop.
Well, that creates an opportunity for entrepreneurs and these businesses so these businesses you're working with, are they all across the United States, or
Yes,
in terms of bringing investments, are they concentrated? Like, are there some in Eastern Oregon, some in Oregon, or California, Virginia?
So far, well, they're without getting into it because of the discussions, they are in the West, they are central and southern. And I know that's really broad and really wide, but where you would think, right? I mean, it's not, Rhode Island or Massachusetts, and it's, not Idaho. So, but you can kind of guess where they are from.
Sure. So tell us how the FDA's recent ruling that CBD is somehow dangerous, or, isn't safe additive. Tell me how your organization looks at that, and tell us about that ruling, because I think most of our viewers don't even know about it.
Yeah, I mean, the FDA basically, to put it in layman's term, kicked the can to Congress, saying, we're not going to make a ruling on this. Congress needs to decide. That's not surprising. Really,
No, courts have been that for decades.
Yeah, right. I mean, you've been in this, and in Oregon, and you have history, so you understand. And I have to say, with my almost 30 years in Washington D.C., FDA is an anathema. It's I've dealt with EPA, change regulations there. Someday you can read my book about the Oxford comma, Jerry Falwell Jr. and Jared Kushner, and it was over in Oxford comma. It's a whole no. I'm going to write a book. It's a
you're going to write a book.
Prior to me coming here, I had a big win over in Oxford comma, and it was just insane. They used every trick in the book and pulled every lever, but we got it changed, but it was all over in Oxford comma. But anyway, going back to the FDA, it's good and bad, right? The bad is FDA has the tools in the toolbox, to be able to make a determination, but they're sticking to the evil, drug. It's potentially or is harmful language, and it's not. Just as you said earlier in the interview, it's been around for thousands of years. If it there's always remember saccharin back in the day. If you feed enough to rats, something's gonna happen. And if you remember, basically the dosage was similar to feeding a rat swimming pool's worth of saccharin over a year, right? The case is that
with the the marijuana smoke on monkeys. They would give them like 500 marijuana joints in 10 minutes. You
Yeah.
know, oh, they suffocated. Imagine there's lung damage here.
Right.
Oh,
Yeah, absolutely. That's the case, and then they'll go back to those, viewers who, I guess, either you're really, really deep into it, and you know the issue, or you're tertiary, but they're relying upon the epidiolex, research study, but that was based off of cannabis, right? Not hemp, and it's a difference, and for those tuning in who may not know or asking, because I get this question a lot, is what's the difference between hemp, cannabis, and marijuana? And I say this is very basic, but it's passed the sniff test. If you consider cannabis as mom at the top of the pyramid, and then marijuana is Mary Jane, the fun sister, and then hemp is a dutiful son, and the only really difference in the United States is the 0.03%, right? So that's
it becomes a different plant once the THC goes. And the thing is,
right.
That doesn't happen till later in those plants' lives anyway.
Right,
but so they actually industrial until they start flowering.
Right,
but I've written articles on that as well. The difference between been published here and there, but
I think it's simple though. Just for the general public, this is what I mean. People are so smart that in this industry, they're the smartest people I've run into, but they're also a little ADD. But the general public is just very much, I don't know, they get confused, right? There's so much going in the world, and they're trying to find some sort of relief. So it's just like, well, they get confused and they give up. So it's just basically, look, mom, cannabis, hemp, Henry, Mary Jane, and it's the percent differences in the U.S. That's an oversimplification, but when people hear that, they're like, oh, okay. And so
the analogy that I usually use is that it's like corn. There's sweet corn, there's popcorn, sweet corn, and so it's the same plant. It's just a different variety. And people can understand the difference between popcorn and sweet corn pretty easily, I think.
Yeah.
But in the day, back in the 80s and 90s, I towed the line, and it's a different plant. But the more I came involved with it, I realized, no, it's the same plant. It's Cannabis sativa.
Right.
It's, just a different variety of it. It's been,
right.
And, farmed cannabis for so long, perhaps definitely more than 12, maybe more than 30,000 years now, that cannabis has been cultivated, that we've co-evolved with it, and it's co-evolved with us, and it's changed us, and we've changed cannabis.
That's true. I mean, the cannabis now will knock you off your
anything you want it to do, really.
Yeah.
If you want it to make fiber, you can grow a lot of fiber.
Yeah.
And it'll do everything, really. You can do it all at once, really.
So, going back to your question about the FDA has the tools to make a decision. Not necessarily a bad thing to kick it down, the alley a bit and let Congress take care of it. And I definitely do think there's support in Congress, for cannabis in general.
Well, it seems like Schumer, Booker, and Wyden said they were going to introduce a bill in the Senate last year, but I guess they couldn't get to that magic 60 number, to bring it forward. Of course, they passed it 2 sessions in a row in the federal Congress for regulating cannabis with Nadler's act. But it hasn't moved forward in the Senate.
Yeah. So, but I mean, that's progress, right? I mean, you went from, presidential elections to, I didn't inhale, to, Obama, I did it in college, or, now, John Kerry wasn't even a blip and nobody cares, right? So you're seeing that progression. I always say it's kind of similar. Look at gay marriage. It started in Hawaii, California, and moved across the state. Look at cannabis, marijuana, medical use, however you want to call it. Some use in the majority of states. So, again, let me use Eastern Oregon. With a medical marijuana license, you can purchase from a dispensary in Eastern Oregon and Ontario, Oregon. I believe they're now up to 6. We had Snoop Dogg come to Ontario, Oregon. Population of 28,000, 30,000, Snoop Dogg. And we had
Yeah.
Wiz Khalifa.
The dispensary there in Ontario is the largest selling dispensary in the state of Oregon. So that one dispensary does more business than any other dispensary. And of course, it's Boise customers, and
Right.
the Idaho State Police are there trying to arrest them at the border coming in. But it's an interesting situation.
But it is. But I mean, again, revenue, right? We were said earlier, votes and dollars. But you have
Yeah.
the dollars, right? We're able to look at opening up the swimming pool that was closed for, I don't know, 5 or 6 years because they couldn't renovate it. You know what? The bugaboo of pretty much the vast majority of states is retirement plans. How do you fund them? That's what's really, if you dig down, you look at these states on their funding issues, is they can't pay the retirement for, their state employees. And so, we went from red to in the black in Ontario because of this. There was strong opposition. I mean, there was very strong opposition. As you know, Eastern Oregon is, very conservative, et cetera. But, as I said, we have more and more dispensaries, and it's revenue. And, the things didn't deteriorate. Crime, didn't explode. There's, more people coming in. But it's revenue. So it's just, the Midwest, went to school in the Midwest. It was, oh, gambling's bad. No gambling, no casinos. It's like, but scratch cards are okay. So you're just like, it's revenue, however you want to call it.
The older you are, the more you see things are changing.
Yeah.
Change is accelerating. There's no doubt.
Right. So I do think you'll see legalization, and going back to the FDA, not necessarily a bad thing. At least it's movement. Sometimes movement's not good, but I think the trend is in the right direction, right? And I think there's opportunity, and you have Senator Wyden, who's a leader, whether he's ranking minority or chair of the finance committee. That was a former Senator Packwood was chair of the finance, and then you had Les O'Coin back in the day in appropriations. So the members have become senior. Merkley on appropriations committee, and then on the House side on very in senior leadership positions. So I think at the end of the day, I don't think it's a bad thing, but we need to work together. Need to work together with U.S. Hemp Roundtable. We need to all come together and work on this in a positive fashion.
How many members are there in the NIHC?
We have 173 members, large, but most of them are like larger. One association in town represents 33,000 retail stores and 13,000 pharmacies. Down to farmer level. Food Safety Net Services is at a patron level. And they're working on the NIC Verified program, and we're rolling that out this year. I mean, we made an announcement last year, but we're clarifying on it. SC Labs is going through the certification. Keisha Labs was acquired by Certified Labs, the parent company of Food Safety Net Services in North Carolina. So we'll go out and visit them, and they're going through that process. So we're, and bankers.
What do they call it? A 501c6 or
yeah, we're 501c6
something?
because we can lobby. A 501c3 for folks who are listening in is for educational and science purposes only, and they can't lobby. You can educate Congress, but you can't advocate, positions or funding through a 501c3. So we founded as a 501c6.
But that's a membership organization, a C6.
Yeah, you're correct. It's a membership organization. Again, broad. First Citizen Bank is a seasoned sponsor of us, Western Bank, et cetera. So.
All right. So you're working on these projects with the potential Thai investors. Are there other projects that the National Industrial Hemp Council is going to promote now or in the near future you can talk about?
Yeah, I think for us for 2023, we're very focused. The top three is the NIC Verify program, and that's headed by Lakshmi Mahon. She comes from the American Petroleum Institute, actually, and has done certification programs for them. And those are, ExxonMobil and Chevron, et cetera. So she ran their certification programs. So she's doing that for us. That's our top priority for 2023. The second.
So let me just jump in here and say, because I'm fascinated by hemp as a fuel source.
Yeah.
So are you guys working with seed and seed producers about biodiesel, or with biomass producers for alcohol production?
We have, not necessarily in the hemp seed directly. We've been talking about that internally with our government affairs committee, because the renewable fuel standards expired in 2022 so it basically expands into other crops. So I think for the farm bill, it's an excellent opportunity. As we look at, I'm very excited about this because it's, you know what it's done for the other commodity, for corn. There's that potential for hemp. So we have, a lot on our table, but we are looking at that because I think that is an opportunity. I have a personal interest in pushing that, but we have to work it through the process, right? I can't, I can have an opinion, but, we have to work it through our members and the government affairs committee and have it, go through the process. But, definitely looking at that, I think it's definitely an opportunity. There's an expiration in the regulation in 2022 that affords the opportunity in 2023 and beyond, and especially with the farm bill. So we are discussing that. So absolutely. No, I think it would be a really good thing for the industry.
I was in Kentucky when Willie Nelson and Kentucky gubernatorial candidate Gatewood Galbraith drove from Lexington to Louisville, stopped in Frankfurt at the state capitol.
Yeah.
It was on CNN at the time. That was back in like 93.
And
then I was again in 96 when Woody Harrelson planted his 4 hemp seeds in Leesburg, Kentucky, and stayed there at Joe Hickey's house.
Oh, yeah.
Way back when.
I didn't know that. I'll have to talk to Joe next time we chat. We served
Joe
together.
and Woody are pretty close.
Yeah, I'll ask him. We served together on the Federation of International Hemp Organization. So, yeah, I'll chat with him when we do that. But no, there's a lot of opportunity. I think we need to be focused, and as I said, about the ADD, we kind of be all over the place. But I think, I think it's consolidated enough. We've seen that happen. Fiber, very much coming forward because it's not regulated. It's just like Thailand, where it's not regulated, and, we're a capitalist society. Oh my gosh, let us do what we need to do. Let the consumer choose, but let the consumer be safe. That's half of our charter of NIHC is, consumer safety. Again, being in the chemical side of things, we had BPA, bisphenol A, that issue. If the consumer doesn't feel safe, we've been very fortunate that consumers feel safe. We had, the story about, the cows, getting high off of hemp, but that was a drug study. That was a problem that people don't know. They're like, oh my gosh, I can drink chocolate milk to my kid, the kid's going to get high. But my worry is that, being a coat, oh, my kid's going to get high from having a hemp coat. But, the funny thing is sometimes I worry too much, because I said that story to a group of folks, and they all kind of laughed and said, well, maybe you'll feed my kid, hemp chocolate milk on the airplane, and that'll make him go to sleep. So,
well, I know you said you had never used marijuana in your life, but you have used CBD now.
Yeah, I have used CBD. The first time was in Oregon at my cousin's.
Did you feel anything from that? Did you?
What
was your experience?
I did. It was very calming. But again, that was a good lesson for me. It's like, well, how much do I take? And they're like, well, 2 dropper full. So like, well, where'd you get that number? I'm over 30 dropper full. Yeah, I was like, but there are people who are more precise, right? I mean, who are in the science world. Well, what do you mean? Well, but I weigh 200, and you're going to give the same dosage as somebody who weighs, 120. So I think that's the problem, is we don't have that, right? We don't really. It's kind of you can get away with it because it's that type of it's a natural substance, and it's like, well, should I eat 1 banana or 2? I don't know. Eat both, unless you're diabetic. Then just monitor your blood sugar. So we don't, that may not be the right, analogy, but it's just basically, we need to do more work and more education. But I think, we've been using it, like you've noted, for thousands of years. But that raises, issues that we talked about at the beginning of the show. What folks might have been using in the 1970s is not the same thing that's what there is now available. Those folks who imbibe.
That. I mean, if you're in the mountains of Nepal, where they've been making charas for millennia, then maybe you were using the same. But if you're in America, probably not.
No. Yeah, no. I mean, you look at the buds that are now in the crystal.
Asian
Yeah.
cannabis since the early 80s, though.
Right.
So,
but you were there.
It
The
depends.
guy did the tiger. He did the Thai, the rolling. Oh shoot, I just drew a blank. He made the Thai sticks that they did in Vietnam.
Oh yeah.
But he was
Thai stick.
Yeah, but that was the original, right? That was
one of the original high potency cannabis, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, that the Nepali hash gardens, and they had state stores in Nepal until the early 70s.
Oh, wow.
When our DEA chased them out. Yeah. I have some posters from those stores. Pretty interesting. But fortunately, we're starting to see a change, and the World Health Organization's actually added cannabis to the list of it's medically appropriate. It's not completely
right.
Forbidden. Now that just has to shake down from the United Nations to the national and local governments.
Right. So it makes it very interesting. I think, if we're watching football, as I keep your eye on Thailand, I really feel just walking around and talking that they did it right.
Yeah. They have 1% hemp in Thailand, though, right? We're limited to the less than 0.3 of 1%. But in Thailand, industrial can be.
Yeah, we're advocating 1%, prior to entering the freedom of commerce. I think, you've probably heard this story, but it's like orange juice. When you make orange juice, there's a byproduct of alcohol. It's very minuscule, but if the, ATF, Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms, wanted to enforce it, they could shut down an orange juice plant, because of the trace amounts of alcohol. And you could also say, you mean I'm giving my kids alcohol,
And then poor farmers out there, their crop accidentally goes from 0.3 to 0.4%, and they have to destroy their field. That's a tragedy for a farmer. Do you know farmers that has happened to?
Yes. Yeah. So absolutely, the crop was hot and it had to be destroyed. I'm always for, even in the processing, right? You're potentially going to go above, but by the time it enters the stream of commerce, it's the legal limit. So no, it's hard for the farmers, right? It seems that I've farmed, and you take the brunt. You take the brunt of it.
I hope industries will support our local farmers and all of that. But we're out of time now, Patrick. We've had Patrick Atagi here, originally an Oregonian, but now in DC with the National Industrial Hemp Council. I know it's NIHCOA.com.
Mm-hmm.
The National Industrial Hemp Council of America. So you got to get all that in there.
Yeah.
Is there anything else you'd like to say in closing?
No, I'd actually just say, we need your support. The dollars go to, to many things that we're working on, what we're lobbying in Congress, these USDA programs, sign up. Daryl Walter is our contact for membership. We'll be at NOCO. Hope to see everybody there. It's going to be a great event. Broadmoor, Morris does a fantastic job. But yeah, feel free to reach out.
For viewers who don't know, that NOCO is the hemp event in around Denver, Colorado. That's the largest hemp-only event in the United States. And so
he puts on a good show. Yeah.
And nice to meet you in Thailand. I hope you have a good trip going back. Thanks for being our show, Patrick.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You take care.
Okay, keep working to restore hemp.
I will. I'm doing my best.